Folks, welcome back to the PlayAction Pod, brought to you by PlayActionPools.com. Got my man Kevin Noon back from Buckeye Scoop. Kevin, thanks a lot for joining us.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
Now, we talked before the season, and we knew there was some question marks, going into Ohio State, but we still thought they were pretty one of the national title caliber contender. Came out of the gates a little slow, a little sluggish win in the opener. And then the loss to Oregon, another sluggish win. It seemed like things were kind of headed one way for Ohio State. But here over the last month or so, Ohio State has turned it on and really looked like the Ohio State of old, just kind of blowing everybody out, making their run back up through the polls. It looks like they could be in a position where they might control their own destiny. How's the turnaround? What do you attribute the turnaround to?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think part of the turnaround is just a matter of a young team getting a little older and figuring some things out. C.J. Stroud does not look like, here at the end of October, does not look like the quarterback we saw at the beginning of September. Was dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury that allegedly sustained in the Minnesota opener. Didn't look himself in the Oregon game, didn't really look himself in the Tulsa game. They sat him for the Akron game, and then he's come back and he's to the tune of 14 touchdowns, no interceptions, just really looks like he has command of the offense. I think, too, the emergence of Trevion Henderson certainly bodes well for Ohio State's ascension in the ranks. He is a special back. That doesn't mean that Ohio State isn't rotating things around a little bit when they have either Master Teague or Mayan Williams available at running back as well, but Trevion Henderson seems to be the guy. And then I think defensively, they're just kind of locking down a little bit more. They've not been playing as much cover one, cover three. They're mixing things up. I think the move on the defensive side to having Matt Barnes involved in the play calling has really helped them. And then lastly, I'd be dishonest if I didn't mention they've not exactly gone through the 27 Yankees at this point with Akron and Maryland and Rutgers and Indiana, a down Indiana team. I think we're going to really learn a lot more about them come November, but, they certainly have done what you're supposed to do when you're going against teams that are 3 touchdown or greater underdogs. You need to come out there and really assert yourself, and they have.
You talked about the shift with Barnes taking over the play calling duties from Kerry Coombs. How it's got to be kind of a little bit humbling for someone like Kerry, a veteran assistant who's been a long-time defensive coordinator, to have those duties taken away. And you could go one or two ways. How has Kerry and the whole defense kind of handled that change?
Yeah, Kerry's handled it like a pro. I mean, because Kerry is a pro, he's been coaching forever and he understands, what's going on with that situation. And I think that, we had an opportunity to talk to him. I think it was during the open week. Sure, it stings. Sure, it smarts. It's not, it's not something that you want to go through in that situation. But his dedication to the team, his dedication to those young men out there on the team is so strong that he's going to do whatever is necessary. And if that means maybe having a little bit of a different role in terms of how the defense is set up or how the defense is communicated, then so be it. And then, it gives them the opportunity to be upstairs, to be the eyes, and to have that veteran coach upstairs instead of on the sideline standing next to Ryan Day. So, there's certainly a lot to be said about, this is slap in the face or whatever, but he didn't view it that way, or at least that's not the way that he's letting on, and he's just moving forward, and the Ohio State defense has really been a lot better in terms of not as predictable, not as susceptible to giving up a big play, and then if you look at the Oregon game, the same play over and over and over again.
Yeah, and you talked about finding out a lot more about this Ohio State team in November, and for Buckeye fans, obviously there's one game that looms largest at the end of that month, but at least a test, a higher level test this weekend against Penn State. Obviously, I think everybody realizes Penn State wasn't a 3 or 4 team in the country like they were earlier, and really an embarrassing loss this past weekend in overtime, whatever, to Illinois. But still a step up in competition compared to teams like you were talking about, Akron, Maryland, and Rutgers. What do you think the keys are going to be for this weekend against the Nittany Lions?
Well, the one thing that I'm already starting to chart is the weather, because it looks like it's going to be cool and rainy here in Columbus, so that could keep the ball on the ground, which is a huge advantage for Ohio State, because Ohio State can run the ball very well and Penn State can't run the ball. I think one of the biggest things, too, is going to be Ohio State's going to be facing its best secondary opponent of the season, at least certainly to this point. There's a lot of veteran players in the back end for Penn State's defense, and I think that's going to be a good challenge against Justin Fields, against C.J. Stroud, and he hasn't seen that in terms of even against some of these other opponents. Not only are they not a great secondary, but then their starters have been out. So that's not the situation here in terms of Penn State. So God bless, CJ needs to sit there and take what's available to him. Focus on those types of things. Ohio State needs to be patient in terms of running the ball, and then on the other side, just don't let if Sean Clifford really does roll out there, and they're saying, oh, he's 100%, which I think is 100% inaccurate. But don't let somebody from Cincinnati, from the state of Ohio, come out there and hero ball you. And Jahan Dotson is probably one of the best players out there in the country. You can't let him go out there and beat you. So do what you can there to limit Jahan Dotson, get to Sean Clifford, and just don't let Penn State hang around. I mean, because we see these types of games, and if you let a team hang around and let them get some confidence, especially coming off of that 9-overtime loss to Illinois, you can't let this team get any sort of confidence. You have to punch them in the mouth early and then just make them play out the 60 minutes.
Yeah, the odds makers seem to favor the Buckeyes big. I mean, they're favored by about 18.5 points. Do you see it potentially being that big of a blowout?
When the lines first come out on Monday, I saw anywhere from like 11.5 to 17. I'm like, if it's 11.5, I'm taking all the equity out of my house and putting that on the game. I certainly think it can, but I don't know if I necessarily see Ohio State putting up 50 against this defense and it being like 50-20. I see it much more likely being a 38-7 game and covering the spread handily there. But I really do like Ohio State to cover in this one. Weather's an equalizer. You just don't know on certain things like that, but the way that the Buckeyes have been playing right now and the way that Penn State has been playing right now, I like Ohio State to cover and kill.
Obviously, like I said, the loss to Oregon was a crusher for Ohio State, and I think, some of the sluggish efforts afterwards, I don't think a lot of Buckeye fans were really even projecting towards a playoff run right then. But now we're kind of back into that. And what's the feeling? I mean, obviously Oregon lost this past weekend. What's the feeling if Ohio State and Oregon run the table and how things shake out? It's always fun to project this stuff way in advance when a lot of things will take care of themselves. But what's the feeling in terms of the Buckeyes and whether or not they truly control their own destiny?
Yeah, Ohio State fans certainly have been watching other teams out there and pulling for certain losses. They would love to see Oregon lose another one. They'd love to see Oklahoma drop one. They're pulling for teams to fall off of the top line. I think Ohio State fans do see a schedule that sets up with a significant amount of ranked teams down the stretch, whereas a lot of other teams will be coming in and not having that type of challenge. I think fans are really interested to see what we get out of the first college football playoff rankings to be dropped on Tuesday. But I do believe that there's a huge segment that believe that the Buckeyes do control their own destiny. But I'll even come back and say that even with a loss, I think a lot of Ohio State fans still figured that they would turn things around. Even as dark as things were in terms of the defense was porous and that the offense, while it was doing some things, it wasn't consistent. I think that there's always this belief in Ohio State's fandom that it'll get sorted out until it doesn't get sorted out. And this year it's been sorted out, but they still have 5 very challenging games left in the regular season, plus a potential Big Ten championship game. You have to just bring it each week. And I think that if Ohio State's able to make that 6-game run, it's going to be very difficult for that committee to deny Ohio State.
That's right. Well, thanks a lot, Kevin. We appreciate it. As always, Ohio State fans, make sure you go over to BuckeyeScoop.com. Check out everything they're doing over there. Kevin and the guys do a great job. So we really appreciate it. Enjoy the game this weekend.
Absolutely.